Hello, welcome to part 3 of this little series of videos on engraving glass with a rotary tool. I promised in part 2 that I would cover surface engraving, so that's what we'll do today. The first thing I should probably do is explain what I mean by surface engraving. Whenever we engrave glass with a rotary tool, what we're doing is marking and scratching the surface of the glass and possibly cutting away the glass, creating a hollow or a shape within the glass. Surface engraving is just that first bit. It's just putting the marks onto the surface of the glass, as if we were drawing on the glass. There are a number of reasons why you might choose to just surface engrave. Perhaps you might just like the look of it. That's just how you want the finished article to look. Most likely the reason is that the glass you're engraving on may not be very thick, so you're limited in how deeply you can cut into the glass. For today's demonstration, I'm going to use one of these little 10cm squares of greenhouse glass. It's only 3mm thick, but I keep these little squares of glass always beside my workbench, so that if I want to have a look to see what a particular burr will do on the glass, or I'm trying to achieve a particular effect, I can try it out on this first before I go on to the piece that I'm actually engraving. So I always have these squares of glass around, and it's ideal for this demonstration. But as I say, this greenhouse glass is only 3mm thick. At 3mm I could cut into it 1mm, maybe 1.5 mm, but much more than that and I'd be risking the integrity of the glass. It would tend to crack and break. If I was going to try to engrave on this wine glass, for example, the rim, that's only 1.6mm thick. Now that obviously severely limits how deeply you can cut into the glass, so for something like this you might well want to just surface engrave the glass. But whenever you're engraving, the first thing you're probably going to want to do is to transfer your image onto your glass. There are two methods I use for this. I don't tend to just sit and draw it on. I'm not that good an artist that I could just draw it freehand. So usually what I'll do is I'll print out the image that I want first. This is one, well, I did draw that originally, but it's taken from a witch or white wolf symbol. I've simplified it a bit. The reason I've chosen to use this image is because it's quite a simple graphic image. It should be ideal for surface engraving. But while I want it to appear this way on the glass, what you have to think about is, particularly on flat glass, but even on curved glass, often what you want is the person looking at the finished image to be looking from the unengraved side of the glass with the engraving on the back. So in order to get that to work, because I want to be engraving on the side I've got the lines drawn on, the first thing I have to do is reverse the image and turn it round. That lets me then copy that onto the side of the glass that I'm going to be engraving on, so that when it's engraved and I turn it over, it's the right way round. Okay? There are two methods I might use to transfer this on. The first is very simple. Lay the glass down on top of the image and get a pen, a Sharpie or a China craft marker or something like that that will write on the glass, and just go over all the outlines with my pen until I get it copied onto the glass. It's quick, it's simple, and it works on any glass where you're able to get the image behind the surface that you're going to be engraving on. The main downside of this method is that you can have a parallax effect, so that if you shift your head a little bit, the line that you've drawn on the glass doesn't line up anymore with the line on the original image. With 3mm glass, that's not really a big issue, but if I had, say, 6mm glass on here, I'd have to be very careful to keep my head very steady over the glass so that I didn't distort the image moving my head round about. The method I quite often prefer to use is to take the image that I have, to fasten it tape it just at the top onto the piece of glass that I'm going to be engraving on, and then slip a piece of carbon paper in between, and just going over the outlines on the image that transfers using the carbon paper onto the glass underneath. It's simple. I've never had a problem with any kind of glass transferring that over. I know some people like to spray the glass with a little bit of hairspray. They think it helps to make the ink stick, or the carbon from the carbon paper stick. Try it, see how you get on. I didn't bother doing that with this one. I don't know if you'll be able to see this. I'll try and see how I get on. But that is my image transferred onto the glass. So now it's time to go away to my workbench and start engraving it. Whenever I'm engraving, I almost always start by making the lines that I've drawn of the pattern just a little bit more permanent on the glass. There are a lot of ways of doing that. I could use a scriber, for example, to go over the lines, but I find if I use a little white stone, as I'm doing here, it marks the lines without cutting deeply into the glass, so that gives me a little bit more leeway. And I just carry on around the whole design until I get it all marked in as it is here. That way I don't risk losing the lines as I go on with the engraving. The next stage then is to take a green stone. I'm using a green stone rather than a diamond because I don't want to cut hard deeply into the glass. So if I use a green stone with a gentle hand and a little bit of time, care and patience, I can get a very smooth, finished look to the surface engraving. With a bit of care and a bit of practice, it almost looks as if it had been sandblasted. Almost, but not quite. You can still always see the little, almost like the equivalent of brush marks, I suppose. You can see how the tool has moved across the glass, and that actually gives a bit of flow to the engraving. But as you can see, I'll just carry on, and I'm filling in one little section at a time. By doing a section at a time, I can get these flow lines going the way I want them to go. And it also gives me a little bit more control of the next stage of the engraving. Once each section is filled in with the green stone, I'll go back round the edges with a very small diamond bar. Now I'm not cutting deeply. Remember, this is just surface engraving. But using the small diamond bar allows me to make sure that the edges are really nice and crisp and clean, and also make sure that the lines that are part of the original design will still be visible even when all of the different sections have been filled in with the green stone. So just right round all of the outline for the section as I've completed it. And once I've been right round the whole of this section, I will swap back again to a green stone and fill in the next one. Now, it wouldn't be terribly exciting for you to sit and watch me fill in all of these areas, because for the whole of this wolf's head, that's how I will complete it. Fill in each individual section with the green stone and then go back round the edges with the small diamond bar to make sure I've got the edges nice and crisp and everything's clear. So I'll skip on till a stage where I've nearly finished filling in all these areas. I'm just doing the last little bit around about the wolf's mouth. What you might be able to see here is that I've left the eye of the wolf completely unengraved. If this was a real wolf, I wouldn't do that. I would actually engrave in that eye, because there's something there. It's an eye. But this is just an emblem, a medallion perhaps, so that I'm thinking that would just be a hole, if you like. So leaving it completely unengraved makes it look a bit more like it's a hole or a space in the shape. And again, having filled in all of the area, I'm just going round the edges with a diamond burr. Now for this next section, I've turned on the water dripper, you can see, because I need to do the wolf's teeth. And I felt I would be more comfortable doing that with the diamond burr with the water dripper on. This is a fairly small diamond burr, so it's going to let me get into all these little teeth. I think there's 3 or 4 on the top and 3 on the bottom here. Again, I'll just skip through so you can see how that looks as we get to the end of that section of engraving. And the only thing that's really left to do now is to go right round this circle on the outside. I've got a slightly bigger diamond burr now, and I've got to go all the way around this circle very slowly and carefully, because drawing a circle by hand is a bit tricky. But if I take my time, don't rush it, then I can get all the way around the circle, and that just finishes off the whole design. Once the wolf is all filled in, it's time to add a little bit more detail. It would be a little bit dull, just like this, all engraved. I think you can probably see that using the diamond burr does mean that the lines are still visible. But what I'm doing at this point is I've got a polishing rubber in the Dremel, and I'm going over all the areas where I want it to appear as if there's a little bit of shade. So basically that's the underside of all of these lines, and that's one of the reasons I needed the lines still to be visible, so I could see which bits I wanted to shade. It can be a little bit tricky, but I've got quite a small disc polisher here, and by moving the glass round about and tilting it up, I can get right up to the lines and create the shadow where I want it to be. Now again, this is probably going to be a little bit dull for you if I show you the whole thing, but I think you can see here how polishing the edges this way makes the glass appear blacker. It makes the shadow appear where I want it to. And I'll just follow right round all these lines, putting in the shadow where I had it in the original image. Rather than make you sit through the whole process, I've speeded it up a little bit here so that you can see how it goes without having to get fed up watching me putting in shadows. Now that the main areas of shadow are all in, I'll go back over it again with this little pencil polisher, a little rubber pencil polisher, which gives me a slightly smaller point and lets me get a little bit closer to the edges and just fill in the detail. And also because it's a slightly finer rubber, it's making the shadows slightly darker in areas where I want them, where I want there to be a lot of contrast between the white and the dark here. Again, I've speeded this up a little bit rather than have you sit through the whole process, but I hope you can get the idea of what's happening at least. The next step might seem a little bit strange, but this area inside the circle, I don't want to leave it completely unengraved. It would look a bit strange, I think. It needs to show that there's something there. So in order to do that, what I'm doing is taking this polishing rubber. It's the same as the blue disc I was using before, it's just this one's a bit newer, so it's a bit bigger. And I'm going to use that disc and go over the whole area. Although it's a polisher, it does still remove glass, so it still engraves it and leaves a mark on the glass. And that's the whole area filled in with the polishing rubber. So I'll just give it a little bit of a clean up, give you an idea of how that looks. So there it is, one Witcher style wolf emblem, lightly surfaced engraved. What I was hoping to show is that even when it is only surface engraved, you can still get that fairly dramatic variation between light and dark, the tones within the image which make it pop out of the glass for you. And I hope we've managed to do that. If you have any questions, then please put them in the comments. If there's anything else you would like to see a video of, again, pop something into the comments for me. At the moment I'm thinking the next video I'll probably go into a bit more detail on the shading and how you get different tones. But if there's something else you'd like to see, just let me know. Thank you for watching.